Picking up right where we left off in the last one. So going back into the documentation, we can see that it says something like your account SID and your auth token. Well, where do you get these things? Of course, it says it right there in the documentation, but it's back in our console. So you can click on the console home, and what you'll see here is your account SID. So I can go ahead and copy that, can bring that into my username now, and I'm going to call this account SID. That's what it is. But again, I'm leaving it as username and password to make it more clear as to how it integrates with the actual REST framework. And then our auth token is right there. Of course, I click on this. Yours might make you re-authenticate, but in this case, I have mine right here. These are my tokens. They will not be valid by the time you watch this, but they are my tokens. So auth token, and that's what we're calling that one, right? So auth token, we're just going right off of what they say there. Okay, so now we've got more about our actual URL, right? We've got our base URL. We have the way to authenticate. So we can actually do a request, and I can do requests.get and our base URL, and then we can get the auth being auth, right? So it's in a tuple here, or tuple as you may hear it referred to as, and then we can print out the r.status code. We can also print out r.text, and this is where this function is going to come in handy, and I'll show you that in a second. So let's go ahead and save all this. I'm going to go ahead and copy all of it as well. And we're going to jump into our terminal inside of SMS. I'm just going to type out Python. Notice Python 3 is there. I'm going to paste everything in, and I get this response, right? So I get all of this stuff. And what's happening here is it's returning XML. So we've seen JSON being returned, but in this case, it's returning XML. So I want to make this look just a little bit better, and that's actually what this function right here does. So this XML pretty will print out the XML just a little bit better. So I'm going to change our print XML to that. We'll save that, and we'll refresh in here, and we'll print it quote unquote pretty, right? So if I make the terminal window a little bit bigger, it's a little bit cleaner and easier to read. Now there's a lot of stuff going on here because I didn't actually do a very good endpoint. I just did accounts. So you might have a lot of stuff, or you might have practically nothing. We've been testing on it, so we have a lot of things. In this case, I'm going to go ahead and jump in back into the documentation. And now let's go ahead and go to using the API. And we're going to scroll down to send SMS and MMS messages. We'll click on that. And we want to change this right here. We're going to change it first to curl. Later, we'll change it to Python, but for now, we're going to change it to curl. Because again, we're using Python requests. This is actually a good time to look at curl calls, and you can know that if you ever see something like curl, you can absolutely paste this into your terminal and it works. Of course, into your terminal, not into the Python shell, but into the terminal itself. You can do a curl call here. That is on Mac and Linux. Windows, you have to do one more step, I believe, but you can do that. We aren't going to do the curl call. Instead, we're using Python requests. So we need to figure out how to actually send our messages. This is a very simple way on how to send the messages. You would have to add in your auth token. That's the only thing that you would have to add here that would actually change how this works. But let's go ahead and scroll down a little bit, and we see a new endpoint here. So this is how we make our message call. So this is the endpoint for it, right? So this is sending those actual messages. Right? That's where we do it. And we can do it with a post parameter. So we'll go through this in a second, but I'm going to go ahead and copy this. And then now we'll do message URL equals to the base URL plus this new stuff. Okay, so what's going on with this new stuff? If we look at the documentation, if we read about it, well, intuitively, you should see this account SID and remember back to this was called account SID. So we need to replace that part to being our account SID, because otherwise it doesn't actually reference your account other than when you actually authenticate. So we do it with the account SID. That's really simple. We just do plus username, which is what we called it, right? It is technically account SID. And if you're confused at all about those things, you can change everywhere to account SID, or you can just make another line and call it account SID equals to username, and then we can replace those things like that. So that's another way that you can kind of think about it. We'll leave it like this just to make it a little bit easier on you. But now we have a new URL, right? So we have our message URL now, and we have a method says post parameters. So that post means to send, right? Just like you post mail, you post to send a message. So what we're going to be doing here is we're going to grab this message URL and we're going to type in post now instead of get. We still leave that authentication, and we now have our URL looking a little bit better, right? So this should be our URL, except something that you should be a huge red flag is our base URL has this as well as our message URL. So it's actually written there twice. So we don't need it. We just need the slash. Let's get rid of that. And now we've got our base URL plus a slash plus the account SID and then plus messages. So now we've got that. So let's go ahead and save it. And I'm going to copy this. And we want to make sure we actually have all of it. So I'll copy the whole thing. And I'm going to clear out my terminal by exiting out and Python again. And then we'll paste everything in. I press enter and I get a 400 error, right? So it says a from phone number is required. So hopefully you remember how to actually add in data to our post requests, right? We look at curl. It shows us how to do the different data things that we might want. But for us, we are doing requests. So it's really simple. We just create a new data dictionary here, and we'll say data equals to this dictionary. And I'll do from, and I'll explain why it's written this way in a second. The from number, it's like, where is it coming from? It's coming from our Twilio number. And the reason I did capital F is because this says capital F. If it's a lowercase f, I might go off of that. Okay, so now we've got that. Let's go ahead and add it into our post call with data equaling to data. And of course, this is the request data, or rather the post data. So not to confuse it with the keyword argument. And these are the auth credentials. Again, also not to confuse it with the keyword argument. All right. So let's try it again. Now that I have post data, I can just copy and paste that stuff. And auth cred is not defined. Oops, we need to make sure we get that in there too. So we'll copy that again and paste it in. And now it says two numbers required. Okay. So we could go through each one like that, step by step, and look at the error, or we could just look at the documentation. So we jump back into the documentation. We see required parameters. The to parameter is required. Well, that makes sense. So 2 is required, so let's go ahead and add it in. And I'll add it in just as they did, right? So they added it in with a capital T. That is the parameter that they wrote. That is in their documentation. So that's what I'll go off of. And I'll do number to text, going off of this variable up here. Okay, so now if we go down, we've got conditional parameters. You must post at least one of these. Now, we're not going to talk about the message service SID, so instead we'll just do from. That's all we did. That's what we set up here, so that's what we will continue with. And now if we scroll down a little bit more, we see two of them. We've got body and media URL. So body being, of course, the text of the message. So the text of the text message, right? And we already wrote message body. Cool. We could have one more thing in there, and that's media URL. And we can actually put in a URL like an image URL. We'll worry about that in a second. I'm not going to do it yet, but that's pretty much all we need to do to send our message. Let's go ahead and try it out. I'm now going to copy all of this post data. We'll copy it, bring it into our terminal, hit paste, hit enter. I get 400. Media URLs are invalid. We actually shouldn't have them in here at all, so I'm just going to comment out that whole line, and we'll try that again. And there we go. And it seems as if we sent a message. So our body says, this is from your Twilio trial account, and then it says, hi there, this is my message. So it should have been sent. So let's go ahead and take a look into Google Voice. And right here, let's delete that other one. And if I refresh in here, I see, there's the message right there, sent from your trial account. Hey, this is my message. I can text back and say, hello there, and hit send. And of course I can send it back, and maybe I'll get a response or I'll get nothing. In fact, I get nothing. I do get something back, and it just says hello from Twilio, basically showing that it actually works. So the send and receive works from this text message. Of course, you could absolutely try this with your own phone number, but you just have to verify that phone number inside of your phone numbers here, right? So if you click on this, you want to get your verified numbers, so verified caller IDs, and you're going to want to add in whatever other number that you want inside of here while you're testing. If you pay for it, it will allow you to send to any random number. So what would happen if you did send it to some random number? Well, I'm just going to change one of these numbers to, like, let's say a 4. And I'll copy it, save it, and I'll paste in here. And what I see is the number is unverified. So if you saw that, that's why. Okay, so let's refresh. Of course, I verified it. They do this verification process where it might do an automated call to you. It might do a text message. Just keep that in mind. Okay, cool. So another thing is with Google Voice, I get these SMS text messages coming to my email. Both of them came to my email, which is nice. Now, the reason I'm showing you the email side is because Google Voice doesn't allow MMS messages. It doesn't allow you to get the image on Google Voice's website itself, which is a little strange to me, but that's okay. So I'm going to just search beach, and I'm going to get an image of a beach, and I'm going to send that as a text message. So let's get like maybe a smaller one. Let's look in here for search tools, size. Let's just do medium. And this is a decent one here. And there's our image. Notice the URL. I'm just copying that URL there. And we're going to come back in here and bring that media URL one back. And I'll paste that in there. So now I have a new message. And we'll say now, I'm going to leave that message body empty. And we'll see what happens. So I'm going to go ahead and copy all this again. Paste it in. And we get a 4 number. Oh, we deleted one of these numbers, so it should be there. We deleted that 4 and didn't replace it with a 3. So let's bring that back. And I get a 201, right? So 201 meaning the message was created or it was successful. And we can now check our Google Voice number. Refresh in here. Might take a second before it actually comes through. There it is. And then it says sent from your Twilio trial account. Nothing there, there's no message after it, right? Notice the first one had a message after it. The most recent one does not have a message. So if we go into our email, now all we see is we see that text message come through, and now we see that actual image showing up as an attachment or as an MMS message. So again, this is something you could try on your real cell phone, but it's nice having it on Google Voice so we can show you right here in real time. Okay, so the next thing that I could do is I could actually come through and get information about any particular message, right? That is the next item that we would want to talk about. And it's fairly straightforward. It's getting the message URL. So that's going to be the message URL right here. So we'll say message URL, and we'll give it to an individual item. So I'll just do end. And then we'll do message URL plus the SID of the actual message that was sent. So if we come back in here, we see that it says message here and then message here. This is the SID right here. So I can go ahead and copy that, and we are going to paste it here. Oh, we just want the message. Let's try that again. Copy that, paste there. So this is giving me that URL, but I want to also add a slash in front of it because otherwise it will just be appended to message. And then now we can actually get this call. Really simply, we're going to do get r equals to requests.get, and this is going to be the message URL end. Let's give us some space here. And you want to make sure that you have your auth token in there. Auth equaling to auth cred. And then we're just going to do XML pretty of get r.text. Of course, that's taking that. Okay. So let's try this one out. Copy that. And we'll paste in here. And it gives us back that same message information. So that means that we can see that it was sent. Of course, up here it says it's queued, right? So down here it says sent. here it says queued. So it actually goes into like a queue that actually sends out these items. So you have some status on this. Well, this is cool and all, and we've covered the actual REST API stuff by using endpoints, but Twilio has a Python library that we can actually use. I wanted to show you this way because a lot of APIs don't have Python libraries, but they do have endpoints, or you might see this curl call. So all we did here was change it to being curl. We actually have the curl call coming through. Now do note something here is that if you add the endpoint of .json, we might actually get JSON data back. So let's add that into our messages call for the main messages URL. So I'm going to save that, copy this, and we'll paste it into our message URL. And then I'll do our message get again, paste that in, and we'll do get r.text, still coming in as XML. So it's not necessarily going to work perfectly to what the curl call is done, but if you see something like .json, you can always remove that and try that URL endpoint. But this is the endpoint right here, which will usually come after post or get. That's the endpoint, and then it has some of this data stuff, again going through the parameters, but that's not what we're going to end up doing. So we're going to leave it here, and then tomorrow or in day 28, we're going to pick it up from using the actual Python library that's created in Twilio. Thanks for watching. We'll see you tomorrow.